Hey everybody. So working on the P-47 project. The forward half of the fuselage infill completed. Now we just need to do the tail end. Again, this area on either side will be left open where there's notches in the side keel, and that again is to make room for the side vents. They won't be these won't be put in place until after all of the infill is done, and we've got the airplane sanded. Probably 2 or 3 sessions of sanding with the filler. So not quite ready for paint, but quite a bit smoother than this. I want most of the smoothing done before we put any plastic components onto the airplane. Also, we have the bottom scoop here, by the way, the main exhaust port for the supercharger, and that'll go on here. And there's going to be a little bit more shaping along these lines on the outside here. So once it's all infilled and we want to position this properly, I'll be able to start carving into this stringer. Again, that's after infill, so that there's support still available, or all around available for that carving to take place, so that we can get the scoop down to the profile it needs to be at. I'm not going to do it by trimming the plastic. I want to leave the plastic pretty much where it is and achieve a flush fit here by cutting away the balsa instead. So that's why we're doing it. Going to wait until all the infill is done. But you can see I've got the scoop completed. Added a piece of cardstock here to finish off the interior of the scoop, or exhaust port, whatever you want to call it. And then we'll get a few more coats of the zinc chromate green applied inside of this thing. And we'll mask it off when we go to paint the airplane, so that the green will remain intact on the interior of the exhaust port. Okay, and that goes roughly here. The 2 side ports on either side of the fuselage, and again, all that, none of that's going to be, plastic will be applied till after we get about 60 or 70% of the sanding done on the fuselage exterior. So, at any rate, this is where we are. I did fabricate a seat. I have a pilot seat, and I've got some sand and seal on it, so it looks wet. That's the sand and seal. And I'm using that to stiffen the cardstock surround that I put on that to replicate the sides of the cockpit seat. Okay, so there'll be quite a bit more sand and seal applied to this thing, and then some sanding on the seat pad, but not too much, because the pilot will be seated there and there won't be too much wood grain visible on either side of our aviator. So how did we come to this configuration on the seat? Well, pretty much you just measure your pilot to make sure he'll fit on the seat pad. So you just take a piece of cardstock, trace around the exterior of the pilot where he's going to be seated there, and then cut a crude seat form for the seat bottom. And then you just need to make a seat back, and that's just an arch top shape that gets glued onto the back of the seat. And then the surround is done with cardstock, and you just kind of mess around until you get the shape you want it to be. You cut that out and wrap it around, right? And then the whole thing will be painted interior green as soon as it's ready. So how does the cockpit come together? So the first thing that needs to be done to get this furnished, it's like building a ship in a bottle, more or less. So the first thing I'll want to do is get the panel completed, get it painted, get the instruments installed to the panel, and install the panel. Then what I want to do is install the rear wall of the cockpit with the headrest. And then the seat will go in, And then whatever space I have remaining is what will be furnished with things like throttle quadrant, a radio, a block for the radio, a block for the switch box, actually probably two of those, floor component for the either the wobble pump or the tail wheel lock, and then an oxygen setup. Not oxygen tank, but the oxygen setting valve and gauge. And those will be the things that go onto the sidewalls of the cockpit after the seat, the rear wall, and the panel are installed. Again, all those things will be installed fully painted and ready. And since I have to wait on the rear cockpit wall and bulkhead with the headrest, I'm probably not going to do much of this work other than fabricating these components and getting them sanded smooth and sealed and painted black until well after the fuselage is finished. And that'll be, I mean, I won't even work on the cockpit until after I have the plastic components installed and faired and shaped. So we'll pretty much be almost to paint prep, fully paint prepped on the fuselage before the cockpit components can go in. Okay, and somewhere in the middle of that, I'll be cutting in the rails for the sliding canopy, and those go roughly just along the top edge of this stringer on either side. And there are two channels that just have to drop into a narrow slot, something like about an 1/8 inch wide here. And it just consists of slotting, two slots for the tabs that we're going to be attaching to the canopy to fit into once it's positioned on the fuselage. So lots of work. I mean, we're just barely underway here. We're just getting started. So infill on the rear of the fuselage, and in between bouts of that, I'll be looking at making these boxes, getting them sanded and sealed and painted for the cockpit. So kind of keep moving forward on a couple of fronts, constantly shifting around so we don't get too locked into any one task. We want to keep switching things up as time allows and time permits. You can see I cut away part of the pilot here, where the phony seat kind of shape seat back was, and that was to get him to fit further back into the seat. He was pushed out about here, and I want him to be seated all the way back on the chair on the pilot seat. So that's why this portion here was just cut away. All right. You know, your mileage may vary. If you want to build this kit, you may not need to do that, depending on how you want to go about it. But for our purposes, that's what we did. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I need to talk about or show you to catch you up, but that's about it. That's what we're working on. Infill, cockpit furnishings, and then attaching the side all the plastic components to the fuselage. At some point I still need to fabricate the front vents here on either side, but that's still a ways off. We're not going to put those together or stick them on the fuselage until well after we have everything smoothed out. Okay, any questions? Put them in with the video in the comment section. I'll try to answer them if I can. Do it as quickly as I can. As soon as I know they're there, I'll put out answers. If there's anything else you'd like to see with regard to this build on the channel, just let me know. Anything I can do to make it better. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.